Hello, my name is Lesika Chinamba and I'm a first year student here at Bishop, majoring in international studies. I'm also a first year representative for PISA, and it's with great honor that I'll be introducing to you Dr. Michele Murray. She is the Dean of Art at Bishop University. She has an MA in Second Temple period Jewish history from Hebrew University of Jerusalem and a PhD in religion specializing in Christian origin from the University of Toronto. She is also a professor in the Department of Religion. Her research areas include Jewish-Christian relation in the ancient world and interaction among Eastern Mediterranean religion in late antiquity. Her latest research project is a feminist commentary on the Book of Tobit. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Carrie and I'm the Director of Communications for PISA this year.
Hi everyone, I'm Lily Schricker and I'm the Communications Aide for PISA this year.
And today we're going to be interviewing the Dean of Arts for Bishop's University, Dr. Michele Murray, and we're super excited. Let's just jump right into it. First of all, can you tell us just a bit about yourself to, introduce yourself to the PISA community?
Sure. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm honored to have been asked to do this. I'm a Westerner. I come from British Columbia, the Okanagan Valley, Vernon to be precise. I am the first person in my family to go to university, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Becoming a professor wasn't on my radar. And it was a trip, a study tour of Egypt and Israel that I took after my first year of undergrad that introduced me to a whole new world, and it literally changed my life. So I tell students, I say there's no way to overstate this. Travel can change your life. So that changed my life. And I sort of came to Bishop's via Israel and Toronto. Toronto's where I did my PhD in religion, and Hebrew University in Jerusalem is where I did my master's degree in Jewish history. So my area of specialty is Jewish-Christian relations in antiquity, ancient Mediterranean religions, with I had a project a few years ago looking at women in magic, for example, and I'm currently doing a commentary on one of the books of the Bible from a feminist perspective. So I am interested in the feminist perspective on religion and history. I almost became a pilot for a career. So I learned to fly. I got my private pilot's license in my early 20s. And loved it. And at the time, there was need for more pilots. In particular, the airlines were interested in female pilots. So I got my commercial pilot's license. But I realized during that period of time, I missed the academics. And what I recognized was that with flying, there's a point at which you learn everything you need to know in order to fly the aircraft. And then the challenges and excitement comes up if there are, unexpected things that happen in the flight, and you don't want those. So I thought I recognized in myself that I really love learning and not ever arriving. So I ended up going back to my original route, which was pursuing an academic career where you never arrive in terms of what you know. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So I was Dean of Arts Dean of Arts and Sciences for 6 years, and then I'm now Dean of Arts, and there's a new Dean of Science who's also a female at Bishop's.
Who are some of your female role models, and have they changed from the beginning of your career and now?
So you sent me very kindly the questions in advance, and I saw that one, and I stopped to think about it. I didn't have a female role model or role models when I started off in my academic career. I had one female professor in all of my academic career. Yeah, I didn't have professors in graduate school who were women at all at Hebrew University or at the University of Toronto. I guess my determination was led by my heart. I absolutely loved what I was doing, even though I didn't, as I said earlier, I didn't have becoming a professor on my as my goal for a very long time. It was towards the end of my PhD, really. I studied what I loved and hoped that doors would open in different ways. I have female role models, though. My mother is one. She was someone who didn't have opportunities for higher education. And so with my sister and I, there's two of us in our family, she and my dad both focused on education for us, so that by the time we finished graduate school, by the time we finished high school, it wasn't a question for me as to whether I'd go to university, it was which university I'd go to. So that was really drummed in, and my mom was a strong voice there. She's also a real athlete, and she's 82, and she is still running every day. She's just, she's inspiring in terms of her focus and determination. And my other role model, I have to say, is my mother-in-law, Ruth Miller. And I should say my mom's name, Lori Murray. Ruth Miller is an amazing woman. She has university degrees and is a feminist and a strong communicator, and I look to her and I think, wow, she too is, she's 81, she is a force, and I take a lot of inspiration from her. Those two women are my primary role models. And then, once I finished my doctorate and started into teaching and being here at Bishop's, there were women already in the field that I saw and was impressed with, and sometimes would reach out to if I needed some advice. And I was very fortunate and found that they were willing to mentor me in that regard. So
sort of jumping off that, seeing as you didn't really have female professors while you were in university, how do you actively try to be a role model to your female students? And then as a follow-up, how important do you think it is for female students to find role models such as yourself?
I think it's so important, and I do hope I'm a role model. I am conscious of the fact that there's still, things are getting better, but what was the last statistic? I think I saw in Canada, in terms of full professors, there are used to be 23, I think it's higher now, maybe 26% of full professors across Canada are women. So still a minority. So I'm conscious of that. I try to be transparent, I guess, in what I've encountered in my careers and how I've gone about things. That's not always possible to insert into the classroom situation. I don't want to go off on too many tangents in the classroom, but I do have female students that come by, and I enjoy and make time for speaking with all students, but in particular with women who are contemplating their path in life. And one of the things I make clear is it might seem that, oh well, yeah, she's a professor, she's a dean, she always knew what she wanted to do, and that so was not my path. I was trying to find my way, and I remember I was 23 years old, and I was still a student, and I saw friends from high school who were already in jobs and stuff, and seemed much more settled. And I was in a conversation with my dad. I remember saying, you know, I just feel like I've lost my way, and he sort of laughed, which I took offense to. Why are you laughing? And he said, because you're 23 and it sounds like you think you're all washed up, you know, at 23. And I did feel that. And I now understand why he did chuckle, because, you know, I was so young, but I put a lot of pressure on myself to figure things out. So anyway, that's, so I'm transparent that way. And something else is, you know, women and age. I try to not shy away from my age. I'm 56 and I'm proud to be 56. And, you know, that's something, just a little thing, you know, I think women, unfortunately, are judged on their appearance and their youthfulness and stuff. And so that's one sort of little thing that I try to do. I think it's so important for students to see professors who look like them. Mm-hmm. And we need to do better in the academy generally in North America, and certainly at Bishop's. We have a growing number of female professors. We need more diversity. I'm a white female, and there are more white female professors than members of the BIPOC community. And so that, you know, there's lots of room for improvement there.
This is a following up on Carrie's question. What advice do you have for women who want to be successful in your field?
I say to women who want to do this, to follow their hearts in the sense of find something that you feel passionate about and pursue that, because there's going to be ups and downs. There are ups and downs in every trajectory. But if you love it, it'll help you get through those downs. Because, you know, there've certainly been times when I've struggled and I've asked myself, what have I done? But then, you know, that love comes back. So that's important. Explore different topics. Because for me, you know, it took a class that introduced me to a whole new sphere. And so I say to students generally, explore that your undergraduate degree is a time for trying different things. You might think of yourself as going in one direction after high school, but then expose yourself to new ideas and topics and you know, if you're in the sciences, take humanities courses. If you're in the humanities, take a science course. You know, it's the time to try things. And if you can find a female role model, that's, you know, that's great, and find someone that you admire, that you can establish a relationship with, of trust, and reach out and ask for advice. Women who have reached a certain point in their careers are, I don't know anyone who would not be honored to answer questions or help someone who's earlier in their careers or whatever. I think one thing that I look back on, I learned, but it took me a while. I am pretty shy, and I didn't speak out or speak up in meetings for a long time. And I also, yeah, I think it was connected to that, the fraud syndrome. When I first got to Bishop's, I was intimidated by the divisional meetings, and I stayed pretty quiet, even though as I got a bit more comfortable, there were times that I would want to speak out, and then I would just be so hard on myself. I was fearful of saying the wrong thing, and so I would be censoring, you know, what I would try to say, and then, you know, by the time I put together what I wanted to say, you know, the moment had passed, and then I would be kicking myself for not speaking out. Eventually, I noticed that, in particular, men tended to speak out, and they didn't always. I mean, many times they said great things, but not always. And the world didn't crumble for them, and you know, they survived it. And so I recognized that. It took a while, but then I started speaking out, and sometimes I'd say great things and I'd be happy with it. And then other times I think, well, that didn't come out the right way. And it was fine. And I grew in confidence. I mean, and that, you know, that then led me to take on different leadership positions, which in the beginning, when I first got at Bishop's, if anyone would have said that, I would have just laughed, because I just felt so insecure. My observation is that women tend to be harder on themselves in that regard, and so are more reluctant to speak out. And this is a generalization, but that's something that I wish I had learned that earlier. But yeah, that's just one thing I've talked about with female students.
So as we've discussed, you currently serve as the Dean of Arts at Bishop's. So how have you supported female students while in this role, and what further actions do you want to take in the future?
So I've mentioned that I make myself available to female students, and I guess I see my role as dean. I sit on a number of hiring committees. I'm conscious of trying to hire more female professors. That's, you know, to put it bluntly, at Bishop's, and more representatives of the traditionally underrepresented groups. So that's something that I can have some influence in, because yeah, just to get back to an earlier question, for female students to see women in roles of leadership, as professors, as chairs of departments, as deans, as administrators, etc. That's important, because it opens one's eyes and makes it possible to envision oneself in these areas.
So you said that you, as you mentioned previously, that you specialize in women and magic in late antiquity. Are there any inspiring female figures or stories in this field that you would like PISA students to know about?
There are stories of women within post-biblical Judaism and early Christianity, say the first couple of centuries of the Common Era, or AD. There are stories of women who are called magicians, for example, who, you know, when you look at the description of their activity, you can find parallel descriptions attributed to men, but often the men are not labeled as magicians. So the label of a magician was used to, it was a social label to undercut power. So that's something that becomes evident in some of the texts that we have. Outside of that particular sphere of magic and women, there's a woman by the name of Bruria, who she shows up in the Talmud, and she is known to be and is recognized by her male interlocutors as being a scholar, being wise, someone who studied the scriptures, and she is presented as a a powerful woman, but one that is dangerous, and that she cheats on her husband. And, and this story has been studied by feminist scholars. And there's a sense that, that there was a need for the predominantly male, it was a patriarchal world, it still is, but very much so in the ancient world, where women who had independence and knowledge and any sense of power were dangerous, were a threat, and needed to be undermined. And a way to undermine them was by calling them magicians. But in this particular case, Bruria was accused of infidelity. One of the things in feminist scholarship that one learns is that you don't take text at face value. You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to ask, okay, what's the agenda of the writer? What is going on in terms of the power dynamics? And that was a way to undermine this woman. She had to be taken down, and that was a means of doing so. I mentioned that I'm doing a commentary on a book of the Bible. It's not a very well-known book. It's called the Book of Tobit. It's a document that was written in the 3rd century BCE, and there are female characters that show up, but it's Tobit who gets the central spotlight. And so part of the exercise of doing a commentary, a feminist commentary on this text, is to put the spotlight on the women and ask questions and really tease out what their voices would have been and are in the text.
So on top of being the Dean of Arts and a scholar, you also are a great professor at Bishop's, and you teach about ancient civilization and religion. So how do you approach teaching course material that deals with female figures being portrayed negatively or as inferior?
So I use the approach that's called the hermeneutics of suspicion. And that means that in reading a primary text, like a text so there's a primary text and a secondary text. Primary text written from the ancient world. A secondary text is written by a scholar about that text. I encourage students to ask questions, to not take the text at face value, to be suspicious. Who's the writer? What's the perspective of the writer? Who is his or her audience? And mostly it's his in the ancient world, let's face it. What's the writer's community, or who is his community? What agenda is there that we can see in the writing? And let's ask questions about that. What's happening behind the scenes about within the community that the writer represents? And so I love doing this, for example, to the New Testament and to the Hebrew Bible too. But say the New Testament, you've got the Gospels and threats or outsiders. Well, why? Why is that? What was happening in terms of, the power dynamics in the community? It uses that critical thinking, critical reading competency that's so essential for life.
So finally, as you've mentioned in your classes and in this interview, you have traveled extensively throughout your career, specifically through the Middle East. What advice would you give to a female student who wishes to travel in similar ways as you?
I would say, do it. The Middle East is fascinating. And if you have any interest in history and culture, you walk around and you see these ancient walls and it's incredible. And you meet the people, and that they are incredible too. I did do some travel on my own. I enjoyed it immensely, but there were certain precautions that I had to take. I didn't do that off the top. My first travel experience was in a group. And that's a good way to get to know a country initially. And then I went back many, many times and then lived in the Middle East. I've been able to travel to Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon. I would say learning the language, at least having, not saying you have to be fluent in the language before you travel to a country, but it helps to know some key words. Also, alas, how I dressed, because I wanted to be able to walk through places and not draw attention to myself. I wanted to be safe. I would usually make contact with someone. I'd have someone to reach out to if things went awry. But I took great pleasure in traveling on my own. I found I met people, and they're beautiful people, both men and women, that were so helpful, so generous. In particular, Syria. I went there in 2011. I was on a sabbatical. I went there. It was my second time to the country. The first time I went in a group, and I had made a connection with the tour guide, actually, of our group. We stayed in touch, and so then when I went back on my own for 2.5 months to travel around, I wanted to see a lot of different archaeological sites. I had him as a contact, and that was really helpful. I took time to study as much Arabic as I could. I left actually 2 weeks before the first peaceful demonstrations started. And then, of course, the war unfolded after that, and I looked on in horror. Traveling with others, of course, is great too. The same things apply. You want to be respectful. That's the thing about studying religion, right? Because you learn about the different cultures and the different perspectives, and it develops a sensitivity. And I know that students who take religion courses, who are really engaged in the material, they're going to be respectful, sensitive travelers. So take a religion course. There you go. That's my advice.
Great. Well, those are all the questions we have for you today. Thank you so much for taking part in this. I think, as we said multiple times, I think it's so important for our PISA community to get to see you and, representing women at such a high level in the university, and to get to hear your voice and, learn from you, even if they aren't necessarily taking a class with you or anything like that. So thank you so much for being part of this today.
Oh, thank you, Carrie and Lily. I really appreciate being asked to do this. And you two are kick-ass women.